Welcome back to DS Trucks. In today's video, we are going to be talking about upfitter switches. Basically, they are switches that use a lower amperage circuit to control a higher amperage circuit. So inside of the truck, you have the switches, and underneath the hood, you have a relay box that houses your fuses and your relays. Now, when you pop off the cap here, you can see what kind of amperage you have. You have your 40 amps, 20 amp, your 25 amp circuits. Now, because this box is out here and the switches are inside of the cab, it allows for pass-through through the firewall. So you don't have to run your accessory wires through your firewall to control them. They are actually already passed through. And when you wire, say you wire 40 amps to one of those switches, it doesn't actually send all that current to that switch. All the load is controlled or housed here. So only low amperage is inside of the cab and your higher amperages are outside of the cab. Now, number one, you can actually get the 240 amp circuits to work key off by removing this little fuse here. Alright, so sliding this little fuse relay over and reinstalling our 5 amp fuse. Now you can hear, once that fuse went in, I don't know if you can hear it, but I could hear it, a relay switch, because inside of the cab our switches are turned. So let's go ahead and take a look in the cab. So inside the cab you can now see that aux switch 5 and 6 are now illuminated because we slid over that little slider and reinstalled our 5 amp fuse, meaning that we can now use our 240 amp circuits with the key off. And that is another reason why getting a dual battery option with these trucks is a good idea, because you have these circuits that can be used key off, and having the reserve capacity of dual batteries is very nice. So how to wire your upfitter switches. Believe it or not, I like to actually physically remove the upfitter switch fuse box by simply depressing 2 tabs on the back of the box, taking off this cover, pops right off, taking off one 10 milli nut, and taking off one plug. There's a plug down in here. It's right by the AC line. Undoing that one plug and setting the relay box here on the air intake tube, giving me tons of room to work, and I don't have to be in the engine compartment down below near my hoses and everything with heat and shrink tube, and just really awkward spot to work with your hands down in there. Although it can be done, and I have done it, if you're doing a lot, or if you just really just want to have some extra space, it's not that hard to just set this on here. Keep in mind, this is hot and you don't want to short it to ground, and it will be a problem if you do. You can unhook the batteries if you want. I didn't for this particular project, but just setting it here gives me room to work and do a good clean job. Sometimes it's hard to really reach down in there, and it might actually be quicker just to remove the box and set it aside and give yourself room. It's up to you. You can do it either way. Box in or box removed and set aside so you can have room. Another thing to consider is your battery tray. Depending on what you're putting in here, you might want to take out the passenger side battery tray. I know on my diesel there's not a whole lot of room to work with, so pulling out the battery tray gives me the ability to put things underneath the battery tray, whatever that device might be under there. It gives me the ability to run wires. A lot of wires run under the battery tray, and it gives you a lot of locations that you can zip tie to so that you don't have wires falling out of your truck. So if you remove your tray, you have access to all of that, and it gives you a nice gap, a nice void to put something, and it gives you a place to locate your wires and secure your wires. Now, with this set aside, you can do whatever to secure the 2 wires together. I've used them all. I've used the shrink tubes with the solder built in. I've had good success with those. I've used crimps with shrink tube. I've just twisted the wires together and used marine grade shrink wrap. I think if you have a good marine grade shrink wrap, you can't go wrong as long as you mesh the wires together good. You can solder them if you want, whatever. This isn't brain surgery. as long as it looks clean. As you can see, the work here looks pretty clean. This is a connection that we made. This is our ground. Now keep in mind the aluminum body, it's a little bit hard to find the ground. I like to just use the factory ground location by just going on top of it, not underneath it, not really interrupting it, but just taking that screw off and putting the ground right on top of the factory one, because our aluminum body can react differently or unfavorably to different screws and things being drilled into them. So this from the factory should react well because it's from the factory, and just using that ground and branching out my Y wire into a Y so that my ground is near, so that my ground runs its route here and then it splits off and my hot goes here. Now as far as connecting the wires, like I said, a good marine grade shrink tube. In my case, I used a crimp with a side cutter, and there's other tools out there. If you want to be real specific, you can buy the correct tool to crimp the little crimps, but like I said, it's not brain surgery, so just using a side cutter to bite down on the copper is just fine. Shrink tube it real nice. I actually remembered to put an extra shrink tube that I could shrink my plastic really clean. I put the shrink wrap over the plastic and brought it down so that it will not come off of the wire. Underneath the fuse box, I didn't remember to do that, but I did tape it so that the wire would not come out of the plastic sheathing. Now, I like to use a premium electrical tape that's UL listed, so it's high performance. It's rated for some heavy duty service, and I think my harnesses look pretty good. Here's a factory harness it's basically electrical tape wrapped around plastic convolute, and it looks very similar, if not as good, because I have the shrink tube that I can put over the plastic, and the factory doesn't do that. So it looks good. What they did looks good, and this is what I did, and also looks good. So with everything wired, the best place to get the information on the wiring color codes is right on the label that comes on the panel here, and you can take a picture of that. It's going to be the most accurate. You can also look in the owner's manual or just look online and get a pinout of all the colors, a color readout for all the colors and what they do and what they mean. There's a couple different things you can do with this box. You can, I believe there's an extra relay in there that you can control with a control wire. You can get 12 volt key on from here and a few other things, but there's a lot you can do with this. You could actually have a device that turns on whenever you turn on the vehicle, and it's just extremely incredibly useful. A lot of functionality that isn't even listed in the manual. So with everything reconnected, you can just go ahead and clean everything up, reinstall your 10 milli, reinstall your plug here, slide this thing back on. It takes only a minute, and there you have it. Your switch is wired. Let's go ahead and test the wire and make sure everything works. Okay, so we are done wiring this up, and this is just for quick demonstration purposes. This could be done even cleaner if you put more time into it. So we have our ground. We added to our ground strap right here. These aluminum trucks, it's good just to use a factory ground. Don't interrupt the factory ground, but just put your eyelet on top, I think is a good route to go, because these aluminum trucks, you can't be putting screws into these bodies. And you really don't want to be drilling your frame either to find the ground. So it's good to find the factory ground and just branch off and add your wire. That's what I've always done. And you can see how clean we did our eyelet there, connected. Then we run our ground this way, have a Y. We go under. You've seen how we did that. We've tied into Upfitter switch number 1, I believe. Let's follow this down. It goes down through the fender well. So what if you wanted to do rock lights on your truck? Upfitter switch 1 is your rock lights. Well, you can mount an LED light right here. You better get a good one, because it's going to be getting blasted. But you mount that there. You can make your fender or your wheel wells flash. You could put high visibility lights in here. Your wheel wells are going around flashing. How cool would that look? Or you could just do rock lights. You could do a 2-mode light that is steady burn or flashing. It looks like you got lightning bolts coming out of your wheel wells. But check this out. We got our assistant in the truck. We have 12 volts here, so you could tie a light right into this. And You have Sony, can you hit that switch? Boom, you heard the relay click. You see that the light's off. And upfitter switch number 1. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek here at number 1. Sony, hit number 1. Boom. And from there you can see that we're lit again. So that's how I like to wire my upfitter switches. There's things that you can do to make it cleaner. Number 1, you can pull your battery tray out. Take your battery out, take your tray out. Unhook both your batteries if you want. You could leave maybe one hooked up so that you don't lose all your information in your truck if that's an issue. If you do leave a battery connected, you can cover your terminal, your hot terminal, with a real good thick rubber glove so it don't touch nothing. Because you think if you don't unhook both these batteries, you touch something, you can mess something up. But unhook both your batteries, pull out your tray. You got this whole load of room under your tray to do all kinds of wiring, to put a device under your battery tray, whatever have you. With this upfitter switch, you have a couple of different things that aren't listed available to you. You have a control wire that goes into this upfitter switch box that can be another switch added that's already fused and relayed and everything, that a switch will actually control a relay in here. It has a control wire that didn't show on that little paper, I don't believe, but there's a thin wire in here that will allow you to add a whole nother switch. You have 12 volt key on fused to like 20 or 25 amps, so that when you turn on this truck, you have an ignition wire for 12 volts, but it's fused heavy. You could put something that takes a 20 to 25 amp load that just comes on whenever the truck comes on and is available to you, and it's just ready to go, and it's fused and all good to go. As long as you use the appropriate wire gauge, it's good to go. So there's a couple different things. I'm sure I'm missing something, but there's so much that you can do with this upfitter switch. It's very clean. You can take the thing off, set it aside up here, wire to it, click it back on, put your 10 milli back on. Super easy. Super easy. So anyway, this is DS Trucks. My name is Sean. If you like this content, subscribe to the channel, share the video. Hope to see you in the next video. Over and out.